turn that off. Good evening, good evening. How is the sound? Well, hopefully sound is coming through. Pop that one down. Pop you down. Alright. So tonight I'm just going to be painting the Aleesia bust from Beyond Miniatures. Now my focus screen is a little small, so if you could let me know if it needs to be focused in a little, that would be awesome. I think that should do it. And we're just going to start off with a base coat. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to set it up so that you guys can see my palette, but maybe one day. So my idea for this little lady is actually a kind of universe theme. So we're going to go dark skin and see if we can pop a little bit of a starry sort of thing on the wings. So we'll see how that goes. Like I said, just let me know in the chat if there's any issues whatsoever with sound, with video. Hopefully we are all set up to go though. Well, let me know if it's working. So I'm just going to be using some of this. I'm going to pop some on the palette. Alright. So I'm going to go for a much darker skin tone here. It's actually my first time painting a little bit of a darker skin tone. I've got two things on my palette. I've got just a general brown, but then I've also got a red and a green that I've mixed for a brown. We're going to see which one's a little bit more vibrant. Alright. I'm just going to go in slow, actually. Let's start. This is a cheaper brush just to get my base coats on, but unfortunately it seems to have a couple of tip issues. Alright. We'll start here and we'll go downwards. How's that? So I'll probably do a couple of coats of this one. The goal tonight is to get her skin pretty much done and her wings started. So obviously this first coat's going to be a little bit messy because we're just popping it on. And all those brush strokes, we might keep a few of them in there, but for the most part these brush strokes are actually going to be covered by the second and third layers. So this isn't the original bust, it's been a little bit modified. The original bust is, you can see that red coming in there from the mixed colour. The original bust is the Aleesia Anatomical bust from Beyond Miniatures, and I have just made a couple of adjustments. I've added the wings. Make sure that's in shot there for you. And I have added the chains, the earrings, and that's about it. Oh, and the little birdie on the side. He's actually a printout from Cobra Mode. So I'm gonna try to keep this darker colour at the bottom. It's just a little bit of an awkward one to handle. Smooth out some of those brush strokes. Here we go. Let's keep that frame there. I'm not too worried about going down over the side here, because I'll just cover that up at the end with a nice black rim, basically. There's a couple of issues along the side here that you might see just from when she was primed. That was the rookie mistake. I actually had her primed and ready to paint when I thought of the idea I really wanted to do. It's getting a little shiny there. There we go, now it's sticking. So I do have a straight up brown, but the reason I'm using this mixed brown with the green and the red is it's the same reason a lot of oil painters mix in their black rather than just using the black straight out. It gives a little bit of a depth to the figure. Let's get these corners. Hit the back of the bird there slightly. Unfortunately, as you can see, I am a painter that suffers from chronically shaky hands, but we get around that. Okay, so we're gonna wait for that to dry. And while we wait for that to dry, we're going to move on to the base for the wings. Now this one's a little tricky. I am going to try and avoid the chains, but I'm also not going to be too miffed if I hit them, because I think before I paint the chains, which you can see there, once again, just let me know if it's in or out of focus in the chat. If it is out of focus, I'll do my best to try and get it back in. Yeah, it looks like it's good. My autofocus doesn't like picking up on such small faces, despite my best efforts. So I'm going to go over the chain in black at the end, so let's get the wings done. Now I've actually got a reference image here. This is my reference for her, so you can see where we're going with her. And so I'm going to be trying to create this little pattern. Oops, apologies. that back in so you got some light. I haven't decided yet if I want to make it as bright on the back. I am a sucker for OSL lighting. Alright, so I've just got a little bit of, using some scale 75 colours here. So I've got a little bit of cobalt blue and azure primary blue. And I'm just going to pop those with a little bit of black to make my base colour. And the reason I am going so dark on my base colour is so that I can really have that contrast pop with those lighter sort of areas. So I'm going quite a dark blue. And we're still working with the everyday brush. This is just a little no-name basically, while we get our base coats on. Now, I'm not too stressed about blending yet. I will probably do a little bit of wet blending on this model. However, I want to get in those really deep base colours yet. Oh, apologies. That's what happens when you live next to a main road, I'm afraid, if you can hear that. And I'm actually intentionally not doing very neat brush strokes. I'm kind of using the brush strokes to start getting those swirls and patterns that I'm going to build on later. I'm going to make sure we get the sides. Yeah, I'm going to pop it there. How's that? I have some nice calming music in the background, but I haven't yet been able to find a good source for royalty free. So if anyone can suggest me one of those, go nuts and we'll get it on. So like I said, I'm using intentionally odd brush strokes just to start building up some of those swirling patterns. I do have a plinth to hold her on. Unfortunately, it kind of makes you have to hold her like 2 feet away from your brush. And as a chronic sufferer of shaky hands, I just find that that's not particularly viable. I do have some gloves. I just found that perhaps today wasn't the best one for them. So I'm building up a little bit of that texture on the back again. Making sure I hit all the edges. Like I said, don't mind if I go over the chains a little. I'm going to come back in and get them later. What's more important is I get underneath the chains. Starting to run out of this colour. I'm going to have to mix it up again. So give me a moment. Make sure I get the ratios correct. A little bit of that primary blue in there. Ooh, thanks Nick. Appreciate that. It's quite possibly also just my habit of speaking real quiet. Let's have a go. My Yeti is up. Let's have a look at that one. Alright. How about this? How's my volume? It is also just a little bit of me talking slightly quietly. Let me know if the volume's still a bit low, and I will boost that again. I'm not too worried here about tearing either. Not because it's not an issue, but because I added that Joe Sonia paint retarder gel. it basically just slows down that drying process significantly. It's, you know, a bit of a catch-22 when you're trying to stream, unfortunately, because it makes things a little slower, but nothing that can't be fixed by the good old hairdryer. But what it does do is it allows me that extra time to go in and blend, recover, wet blend. If I decide that I still want a wet blend on this particular coat, that's all still a viable option. So it really is a godsend. Water's great, but you often find that, especially here in Australia where it's quite humid, or sometimes quite dry, depending on what it feels like, water's just not quite as reliable. Now let's have a look and see if that's in. There we go. So it's getting a little lighter there, so I'm going to add some more black into that. I'm going to add a little bit more of that paint retarder. Sorry, I'm speaking quietly again. That is a habit I am going to have to break. But we'll get there. Alright. So I'm going to go a little bit more gentle in here, because blue is a lot harder to cover than brown. Not impossible, but harder. There we go. You can see that I've already started to get it on that black bit, unfortunately. So the wings were a 3D print as well, and what I've done is I've just gone in, I've bent and broken them using a heat gun, well, a hairdryer in this case because I was a little too lazy to get the heat gun out. And then I have used a combination of green stuff and super glue to get them back together. Alright, so she is now base coated there. I'm just going to make sure I get the ears before I forget, but before I do the ears I want to do the hair. So it's a little, fair warning, we'll warn you now, I am a brush licker. Apologise, but don't. Alright, so I think I'm going to make her hair black, and then I'm going to glaze some blue in over the top. I'm still not entirely sold on it yet, so yeah, you know, we might change it later. But for now, I'm going to go quite a deep black. I want to kind of keep to the main colours, which is that brown with a hint of orange, and those blues, which I'm going to highlight in the reds and the pinks. So I'm kind of staying in the same colour areas. Alright, so let's pop her in here. Once again, just chuck it in the chat if I'm a little too quiet or if she goes out of frame or focus. I'll try check in every now and then to make sure it's all going smoothly. So you can see here she's starting to dry on the face and she's starting to dry on the bottom, but she is still a little bit wet here, so we're just going around and doing a couple of the other base coats first. So I'm going to start here. The odd priming here is once again because I primed her and then decided to change what I was doing. You'll see that might be a little bit of a trend. So this is actually a Winsor & Newton heavy body acrylic black. I do normally paint with Vallejo majority of the time, but I usually just find, especially on larger busts like this, I like the heavy body acrylics. They give you a little bit of tooth, they give you a little bit of give, they're easier to blend. And I don't feel quite so bad when I put a lot more out on the palette than you normally would for, say, a 28mm scale. Ooh, actually, let me see if I can. Alright, I've just popped the gain up a little because I have that really bad habit of speaking a little quietly. Let me know if it sounds a little odd. In this heavy body acrylic black, there we go. You might be able to see it, but there's a slight blue tint. It's just the slightest amount of blue mixed in there. I promise I will try and keep my brush strokes as easily visible as I can. Unfortunately, there are always those little corners of the miniature that just don't want to play nice. And hair, faces, and neck are always the biggest one. So I'm going to get out, I'm going to start using this little baby. So this is my paint holder for her, but as you can see, she sticks out quite far, which makes her a little hard when my hand's all the way out here. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, husband coming in and having a visit. Like I said, I'll turn that gain up a little bit again. There we go. Please just yell out if I'm quiet. Put it in the chat, it's the easiest place to see it. We'll get this figured out. Alright. Just added a little bit too much blue back in there. Let's add some more black. Okay. This is quite a large brush to be going into these smaller areas with. So we'll see if it'll do it and if I can keep the light on it. There we go. Just popped her skin slightly there. Of course, now that I've popped the gain up, the downside is you're going to hit every single time that I pop it in that water. So that's just taken away a little bit of paint on her collarbone, so what I'll do is just do the same on the other side. There we go. Try and keep her in focus. There we go. Keep having to tell myself to speak louder. We'll get there. Gonna try and make this a weekly thing with the caveat that I am a teacher, which means that every sort of 5 to 7 weeks my life gets extremely hectic. Not that it isn't hectic most of the time at any rate, but it gets even more hectic. Keep her in shot there. And the downside to that is that I will attempt to keep to a nice weekly schedule, but we shall see. Pop it back in. which is a lot harder to keep in shot when I've got this on. A little bit more black in that mix. It's getting a little bit blue. There we go. It's going back more towards that black colour now. Still that hint of blue. And we will see if I keep it. But it's good just to give those colours a little bit of depth. Once again, I can go back in. Oh, I gotta stop saying that, that's a new one. Once again, I can go back in without tearing just because of that slowing on the drying. Probably about 5 to 10 times slower than normal heavy body, and probably about 15 times slower than your general hobby acrylics. So your general hobby acrylics tend to come pre-thinned, which also means they tend to come, obviously, well, thinner, but watery is not the word, but they do dry a lot quicker than your heavy bodies unless you apply them particularly thickly. So I'm just taking her off again while we go around here. So I'm going to just try hit that bit of the hair under the wing. Might go out of focus for a second while I do that. Let's see. Alright. Having a look here, I'm kind of liking this white streak here. So I'm going to paint it for now, but I might come back later and add that back in. We shall see. Right. So I'm going to pop it with the edge of the brush. Just fix up those little areas. There we go. So that's still quite wet, so I can kind of come in and blend it back in. Now, just got a little bit more basing on the hair to do. It's starting to get a little thin there. So I'm just going to come in, make sure my paint's not too watery here. There we go. You always want your base coat to be a little bit thicker, not quite going for that glazing effect just yet. Alright. And going for that much darker hair colour also helps hide all sort of priming crimes. Oh no, that seems to have decided to shut off. Oh no. Hey Groot, how's it going? It seems my camera has just had a hissy fit right when we were attempting the middle of the first stream. How would you know? Oh no. Alright, well, let's try a new version. How's it going today, Groot? we are going... Ooh. You've just come in and we're about to go to... I hate to say it, I'm really afraid the technical difficulty might even be the camera battery, which is not an easy fix. Sadly enough. I did charge it pre-stream, but it doesn't seem to have cared. Well, note to self, backup camera batteries. Alright, I'm going to be 3 seconds while I attempt to figure this one out. Alright. Alright. It's not quite, unfortunately, as good as the other, but if you can hear me and you can see this, well, we're off to a decent start. And then hopefully in about 5, maybe more, we will get that good setup going again. Hey Keki Zoot, how's it going? Unfortunately I haven't been able to get mod happening to get rid of that little bit of spam, but for the rest of us, let's get going. Chest and her face is drying pretty well. As you can see, those are the colours I was using. Hey, it's focused in a little bit. Let's see if we can get that focused a little bit more. Well, that's what we're going to work with for now. It's not too bad. Pop that out of the way. So what we'll do is unfortunately, this stream, like every good stream, as Groot said, it's going to have a couple technical difficulties. We'll work with this one for now. And then hopefully in about, usually about 20 minutes, we will get the good camera back up and running. And you'll be able to see it a little bit closer. Okay. So we're just finishing off her hair there. Let me know if it's really untenable, and then if so, we shall take a bit of a pause, wait for that to charge back up. Like I said, it was charged, but apparently testing it today took it out of it, and come back. Make sure that's there. So I'm just going to get this hair done, and then I want to get back to the skin. I want to try and finish the skin. We'll get in all of our base colours. Especially because this way, if we get this base colour into the hair here, and we screw it up, it's not going to be an issue. Oh, that looks a lot bluer through the camera. So how was everyone's day today? Did we get some decent painting done? It's the Sunday here for me. So this is my painting for the day today. Just going over a couple of areas on this hair while I've still got this colour up. Just to darken them up a little bit. Alright. How about it, Groot, if you're still there? Is this one a decent little camera? Can you see much? I'm just going to mute it briefly while I hit this one with the hairdryer to get this a little sped up. And we're back. Okay. So we've just dried the hell out of that skin. Get rid of whatever this is on the side of the face. I don't know if you can see it, but there's this tiny little dot. It's flown in. There we go. I mean, one upside of this current setup while we wait for that battery to fix itself is that you don't have to see every time I want to change colours and lick a brush. So, you know, positives. Okay. So I'm going to use that same colour to do a second base coat. You can see that the first base coat was really thin. I still want to keep some of those values from priming. I'm still using that red-green colour combination just to get a nice chocolatey brown with a hint of orange rather than a flat brown. And the reason I'm gunning for that hint of orange is because I'm trying to find that nice colour balance. So we're going to have so much blue on the wings and in the hair that I don't want to overload the mini with just blue. I want to make sure that somewhere in there is some of our counter colour. Alright, so we've got loaded up with this newly mixed red-green combination again, and this one, it's a much darker coat. I'm going a lot more carefully this time, but I'm still quite thin. A lot thicker than I was, but still quite thin. I have a plan here. You may have noticed there's a little anomaly in that base primer, and I actually want to try and create a scarred texture on the skin. Which is going to be a slightly new one for me. So I haven't necessarily done scar textures as much on Caucasian skin, let alone considering this is the first time I have painted a darker skin tone. So it'll be an experiment. So I can go over that paint without tearing it, because I've got that paint drying retarder in there. But it's a lot less than the first coat, because I wanted this to be a much thicker coat. Now this is a beautiful sculpt, but I'm not a massive fan of the teeth. So what I'll probably do is just deliberately paint them a little bit dark, if not black, and we'll see if we can get them to blend in with the back. Teeth look really good, they're just not necessarily part of what I want to do with this mini. Gonna change to a finer brush soon. This one is a imitation sable, and I'm gonna change to a real sable once I get these base coats to where I want them. So if you can see, I know this camera is not as good as the other, but if you can see that there's still a little bit of lines coming through on the skin there, I'm going to probably do one more base layer, but I'm debating just going straight to a sketch. Alright. So while the face dries, we're going to pop another coat on these wings. And this time I am going to wet blend. So we're going to pop her down. I'm going to grab out these 3 colours. Here we go. So I'm going to work with turquoise blue, pastel violet and magenta, as well as the primary and cobalt blue that I've already got on the palette, and the black and the white. And I'm going to do just a little bit of blending to get that aurora effect. So I'm also going to pop some white on my palette. I'm a massive fan of wet blending with these heavy body acrylics, especially these scale 75 ones. They just blend so nicely. You can get some really nice blends and wet blends out of your Vallejo and your Citadel and your scale 75 non-artist acrylics, but I just find that having that heavy body, which gives it a slightly thicker coat if you're not careful, does still allow it to just wet blend a lot better. Alright, so I'm going to start, I'm still using my cheapy brush because wet blending can be quite abrasive on the brush. I'm actually going to start by coming in with that dark blue, it's almost black blue, and doing the edges of the wing, just the inside edges, the ones we're not necessarily going to see, just so they're done. And the bits where they come up over the edge, I'm not going to worry about ruining any of my wet blending later. So pop it back into frame. Probably stream for, what's the time now, 8:30. Probably stream for a couple hours tonight. I have the blessing of not having full-time work tomorrow. That doesn't start again until Wednesday due to the public holiday. So I'm going to take full advantage of it and go a little bit later tonight. So feel free to pop in and out. Like I said earlier, once again I'm going to have to fix that. I'm going to stop saying like I said. Just chuck it in the chat if you're finding it a little hard to hear me. I would also say chuck it in the chat if you're finding it a little hard to see the figure, but I mean, we've already acknowledged the fact that camera issues are rife tonight. Now, these outside edges that are really visible, I may end up doing a lighter colour, but for now it's much easier to make them darker and highlight, because that way you know that you don't have to worry about them later. Just using the side of my brush. I'm going to get in down here as well. This one I will probably go over with a wet blend. Oh look, cat hair. She's not even allowed in here or on the desk. She will get cat hair. Actually, that's a lie. She's definitely allowed in here. She's not allowed on the desk. What about you guys? Got any cute pets? I'm always down for cute pets. So, we're just going to start on this wing. So I'm going for that reference photo I showed you guys earlier. I'm going for quite a dark background. So I'm going to make sure I have quite a dark colour on my palette. And then I'm going to wet blend in those brighter colours. I'm probably not going to go that pure lilac purple, but I'm going to use that lilac purple as a transition colour. So on my palette at the moment I'm just mixing a couple of those colours with that lilac purple, and it's actually just a unifying colour. Helps them all get the same tone, because it's not a particularly strong colour itself. It'll take on the colours around it before it mixes into a strong colour. Alright, let's have a go here. So I'm going to start some of those darker colours. I'm going to do the same thing I did earlier, where I deliberately do heavy, messy brush strokes. Not quite stippling. It's not really a stipple. It's more like deliberately making those visible brush strokes. I'm going to do that to create those patterns of swirl. The thing you have to be careful here is that you don't just muddy all the colours. You want to blend them, but you don't want to take out all the saturation. So I'm going to blend those blues on there first. And I don't mind if I hit the chains because I'll come back over them. I almost want... I'm going to go a bold white through the middle there. And that's kind of the basic structure. And I'm going to just blend the edges. Right off the shoulder there. I'm just going to blend the edges of that white into the blue. Then over the top I'm going to start popping in those brighter colours. So, I've just got that reference picture in front of me, which is what I'm currently following. I'm not obviously following it exactly, but I am using it to get an idea of the general flow of colours. So, popping in that magenta. And I don't actually want too much of this white to last. So I'm actually going to make it the basis for this blue. I just want that hint of white, and then from that hint of white we can kind of build up those starry patterns. So you'll notice, like I said, you can't really see that lilac in there. It's just being used as a colour to help combine these ones together. I'm going to do a little bit on the edges here. And then the goal later is to come in and refine this with multiple layers. And by doing so, we'll create that beautiful aurora galaxy, well, not aurora, but galaxy look. So you can see it's starting to take on that galaxy look now. Just going to put a little bit of framing dark in there. Just a nice, combine that magenta and that blue to create a nice dark purple, which we're going to use to just frame some of that white. I'm going to make sure it's just not too bright here on the inside of the wing. Oh, I'm almost out of my cobalt blue. Just going to chuck some more of that on the palette. So for anyone who's just joined us, the streaming camera has decided that I tested it too much today and that its battery was going to go kaput. So hopefully in about 20 minutes we'll actually get the good quality camera back up and running. But until then, we've just got this little emergency camera. I didn't really want to stop streaming but I know this isn't the best quality. Alright, so our goal is actually going to be to try and match that, not exactly, but similarly on the other side. Especially if we can get this little aurora galaxy that we've started here and kind of make it go up the other side of this wing. So continue the colours in the same way. And to do that, I'm just going to turn it upside down so I can kind of continue this line here. So I'm going to go back to those darker colours. I'm not going to put them here because that's where I want that line to follow. So I'm going to start down here. We're actually going to end up darker in the middle on this wing and brighter on the tips, kind of the opposite of the other wing. Going so dark we're almost black, and we're wet blending, kind of. We're being very messy here, and the reason we're being messy is because we want to get those edges and those swirls that you find so often when you're looking at those galaxy pictures. So we're going to continue this aurora we started on the other wing. We're going to follow it up here. I'm going to do the same thing where we do a really bright white. And then we surround that white with those pinks, those purples, and those teals. Just those. You don't want that white too strong. If the white's too strong, what's going to happen is when we go to put in our little galaxy points, is they are going to be not bright enough to compete with the big white streak in the center. So really we want to not tone down the white, but we don't want it taking up too much of the miniature. Get more of a swirl pattern in here. Just going to come back in with a little bit more of that white and teal. Bring it back slightly. I'm also using a little bit of the loaded brush technique here, which means that when I'm putting paint on my brush, I'm putting on one colour and then I am putting another colour on after it, so that when I put it down on the miniature, it goes one colour and then blends into the second colour. I'm just gonna... Alright. I'm going to continue that down here. Like I said, we're going to do a little bit of a lighter one down here, in particular this teal colour. I'm going to get that down there. And really push this teal and lavender. Bit of a different coloured galaxy here. The kind of story of this miniature, if you haven't already guessed it, is I'm going for a Gaia theme, I suppose would be your best way to put it. Mother Earth theme. But a little bit of a different take on it. I'm just going to put a little bit of white, once again using that loaded brush. So I've got half white, half teal. I'm just going to make the edges of this pop in white. This is actually the second one from Beyond Miniatures that I've painted this week. I don't want to say finished, but recently mostly finished the Dahak Anatomical bust. He's kind of sitting to the side at the moment because I'm not entirely sure if I want to declare him finished. So I'm just bringing that contrast back in. Coming back in with those darker colours. Nice deep blue, a little bit of black. Alright. So as they are, they're a little bit messy, but hopefully as we layer up and refine and start really bringing in edges, they're going to look a lot like galaxies. And then on the back, I'm not going to do too hard on the galaxy on this one. I'm actually going to stick fairly simple and just go that really dark blue / purple. And I don't want the miniature to be too bright on this side. Really just bringing in that cobalt blue and that magenta to create that purple blue mix. I'm doing it quite rough on the brush strokes again. I'm still trying to get that texture. I'm still trying to get those swirls in my brush stroke. So it's very subtle, and I might even bring in like a reverse. Instead of the white, can have a fair bit of black in here. Really just going to make these wings quite dark. Still going to add stars, so they're still going to be interesting at the end. But we're just really making them dark. Trying to not have to use any more cobalt blue. See how we go. This also acts as that second base coat. But we're just wet blending it in. Don't know if it's someone new or someone old, but our viewers seems to have gone up again slightly, so if you can hear me or can't hear me, let me know, chuck it in the chat. We're just going off a temporary camera at the moment because my camera seems to have disliked the amount of testing I did today, and my camera has for now decided to shut down, but we're getting that fixed. Alright. So those are going to thoroughly dry. We're just going to remember to hit those ears, which I did tell myself not to forget earlier, and then promptly forgot. So those little earrings on the side are another addition that I made when I converted this bust. Alright. So for now, this brush is still serving me fairly well on the body. So I think I'm going to keep with the cheapy brush for now. What I am going to start doing is experimenting with slightly lighter skin tones. Just sketching in some highlights. So for instance, I said I wanted to do a scar here. And we want to sketch in the highlights on the muscles in these areas. So it's actually, we're not going to go too bright. We're going to go over the whole thing with the unifying base coat again. But we're just going to start putting in some of those highlights around it. So I'm going to start just with those collarbones. So you can see it's quite a light colour. That is going to be toned down significantly later. Just using the edge to blend it. I've just mixed the Scale 75 light skin with my pre-made brown to get this colour. I'm just sketching this in, following some of those main areas. I'm going to go up the collarbone here. The other thing about heavy body acrylics is they, even without the gel, because they're so much slower to dry, they do respond a lot better to blending just with water. So you can just go in and feather edges a lot more cleanly. Oh, getting a little too thin here. And that's a little too light. Let's try this one. There we go. So you can't really see much of the definition on her stomach, so I'm not gonna go too crazy on it. I'm gonna leave it quite dark down the bottom here. So there's a little bit here which is going to end up with that highlight. I'll probably refine a lot better. I've got a reference photo in front of me, but that reference photo is mostly just for the face. So I'm going to need to go and find myself a reference photo for the body. We're just going to go all the way up here. I'm going to blend. We're going to go that lot darker blend here. And you'll notice I'm still being quite rough with my brush strokes. I am just sketching. I'm going to come in and refine this a lot more later. I really want those deepest shadows under there and the highlights up here. But I don't want them too bright. A little bit too much red in there. And because this one's a little bit of an experiment for me as well, you might find me going back and forth a little bit. I'm just really testing out what I like the look of. So like for instance, I just saw this bit down here, which you notice the light reflects off quite nicely. So I'm just mixing up a little bit more of that brown. Go. Adding a little bit of that light skin tone that we've got here. Just going to sketch down this way. There's a little bit here that I'm going to pop in. Just got to make sure that I am keeping in mind not to go too light with these highlights. So every now and then you'll notice that I kind of realize I've gone a bit too light. I'm just going to pop in a little bit more of that dark. Once we get to the stage where this is drying, I might pop that back on a quick break and see if we can get the good camera up and running again. Now I am painting this bust because it was already on my list, but is there anything that you guys would like to see me paint? Anything you've recently gotten into? Anything that you're thinking of finding some more inspiration for? Because I am looking for some ideas of what to put on my next couple streams. At the moment I'm leaning towards my Kingdom Death models, and I have a Bushido commission that I've got to finish up. So both of those are on the list. Oops, back in focus. Is there anything else you'd like to see? Just gonna address that hair spot while I see it. Okay. Alright. So I'm going to do two things now. First of all, I'm going to grab a glove because you can see the oil on my hand is starting to pull away the paint on the back of her head. And the second thing I'm going to do is see if we can get that camera back up and running. So feel free to go take a break. I will be back in 10. Let's try get this camera going again. Oh, that's a good sound. Hey, there we go. Let's just restart it until it works again. That works every time, right? Now that I have paint all over me and we've sufficiently wasted that much time, thank you, the people who stuck with me through that. Unfortunately, a first stream or a test streamer is never without its issues. Whoop. Alright, let's get this one started again. So like I said earlier, just tell me if the focus on this camera is a little bit out, because it's a little bit harder to tell, but I can manually focus this one. Oh, just realized you probably heard all that in the background. Audio should come back to normal now. So you can see where we've placed the highlights here. See if we can sharpen that a little bit more. Alright. That was an adventure. I think we'll hopefully get about another 2 hours streaming out of this battery. So fingers crossed that quality camera holds up. Alright, well, now all my wet palette's dry, so let's mix those colours again. It's a good little wet palette, but it only holds up so much. Actually, I lie. It's the Red Grass Games wet palette, and it's probably hands down the best wet palette I've ever experienced. Unfortunately, I just ran out of water in it. So please, just if you can, pop in the chat if everything's working on your guys' end. Let me know how the focus is. Let me know if there's anything that needs fixing. Let me know if I'm quiet or loud. This is the first stream, so I can't quite tell from my end all of the time. Alright, so I've just used my no-name brush to mix up that colour again. Now I'm actually going to switch to my good brushes. So I've got here, they're both Broken Toad, the size 2, the Fugazi, and the Broken Toad Kolinsky. I'm going to start with the Fugazi because it can actually take a little bit more in terms of how rough it is, but it's just as accurate. And then I'm going to switch to the full Kolinsky Sable, size 2 Broken Toad. Oops, sorry about that. That's just where I keep my caps. I'm going to have to change that, aren't I? The reason I'm going to start with the Fugazi but then go to the Sable, despite the fact that they're the same brand and the same size, I just find that pure Sable, or at least a good mix of pure Sable, gives you a much softer brush with a much higher control, but it also follows the lines of the model a lot more organically. So you'll see here, this is my Fugazi, and it bends quite well, but it's still quite stiff. Whereas if I go over here, so same company, same size, but synthetic, you'll notice, I don't know if you can see it on your end, but it's a lot softer. It just follows my hand a lot easier. So we're going to start with a slightly tougher brush because we notice that there's still some issues with the layering on her face. We haven't gone and put in our second base yet. And then we're going to go into the proper synthetic. Both brushes though are still fairly high quality, so I'm still avoiding getting any paint in that ferrule. Still treating them quite delicately. But I can really push up against things on this brush. Oh, I might need some more black. Like even that ever so tiny line of the hair just comes through real nice on these brushes. Apologies. a bit more water in that. Well, I lie. It's not water, it's medium. Help get that blending in. Making sure you're getting into all the crevices. So I'm still deciding on the colour for the lips. I'm debating between the traditional sort of, you know, dark red, or going with the theme we have in the wings and the hair, and going that sort of unearthly blue. Still haven't quite decided which one I want to go. Sorry, I'm getting a bit quieter again, aren't I? So if you have a preference, let me know, because I am still unsure. So probably just going to chuck a base coat on the back now as well. Just getting in those shadows where I've gone a little bit too far with the sketched highlights. And I'm not taking too much trouble to mix the brown thoroughly. I don't mind if you get a little bit of that red or a little bit of that green. It kind of adds to that sort of unearthly look I'm going for. I think I'm going to focus the highlight on the inside edge here. And then go a little darker on this outside edge. It's mostly a top-down OSL on this one. The reason I've done that top down is I want the eyes to be looking upwards, and that's going to be a lot easier if I do that top down. I'm just going to move over slightly so I'm back in frame. And I'm not going to do too much on the back, but there is still a little bit of skin here. These bits here that you can see, they're actually the green stuff that I had to use to hold the wings on. The wings were too heavy and the back was just too smooth. So I think I'm not going to do them skin color, I'm going to make them a part of the wings. Still want this quite dark on the back. I really am going with a desaturated look on the back. Is the chat still working, by the way? Ooh! Oops. Just lent a little hard on that chain. Let's pop that back in frame. I know, is the chat still working? Something that's weird to ask on Twitch, but as it's the first stream, I just want to make sure everything's up and running like it's supposed to. I know I was told earlier I was a little bit quiet, so I've been trying to speak a little bit louder, but I also turned up the gain, so let me know if that actually helped. Sorry. Let's pop that back into view. So I'm trying to go real dark here, in behind the wings and on the back. So there's a large spot there. I don't know if you can see it. It's quite bright. The bird, I'm planning on doing a combination of black and quite an ethereal blue teal, almost like the blue teal we have here on the wing. So I'm going to use my clean water a lot more on this brush because it's the good brush. Well, a good brush. If you've got any tips on painting darker skin tones, feel free to shoot them at me as well. I'm kind of winging it on the highlights here. It's not going to be too much of an issue because a fair chunk of the skin on the stomach is going to be covered up anyway. Actually also taking on board a little bit of advice from Squidmar Miniature's new masterclass stream that he recently did on Ilanth. He did a really good sort of explanation of how to paint highlights on muscles and how to follow it all the way up. So part of today's paint is actually applying that a little bit, which is why you'll see me do this line down the middle. I'm just trying to connect all the areas of highlight. Going collarbone, highlight at the top of the breasts, and highlight on the top of the muscles. I'm still only sketching, so I'm not looking for anything clean right now. I'm just sorting out exactly where I want what colours, what highlights, what midtones. That gel still allows me to do a little bit of wet blending as well. I'm just going to go in real dark here, underneath the chin. the downside of painting that darker skin tone on camera. I suppose it's a little harder to see where I'm putting things. So I'm hoping to do this weekly. I'm still deciding on the day. At the moment, I'm thinking Thursday or Monday. Didn't particularly want to do Friday because, you know, so often we make plans for Fridays. But I can't do your Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm also debating popping it in on Saturday nights. I just have to debate what night is going to be best for most people versus what nights I am available. So I'm just popping this black over the teeth here. Like I said earlier, I really do like the sculpt of this, but the teeth just aren't part of how I want to paint it. Just gonna pop some more black. I've run out of black. Scale 75 opens easily enough, but Winsor and Newton really don't like opening without destroying your fingers. Because black and white we use so much of, I've got those two in the bigger tubes of heavy body acrylics. So I'm just putting a point on the brush using my hand. And we'll see. If I can't paint the teeth out, then I'll do something with them, but I'll try to paint them out first. How are we looking? Alright, it's time to sketch in on the face. That's a little thin. Kind of cheating here. I'm using the overhead light to show me where the highlights would normally be. So I'm actually highlighting the areas that my light is already highlighting. I'm just sketching still. I'm going to come in and I'm going to refine a lot of this later. Just getting those basic shapes in. I'm also still debating whether or not I'm going to give her any makeup. Thinking I probably want to go ethereal but natural. So we'll see. So that's sketched in. I'm running out of that colour again. Just popping in that mid-tone here. I'm keeping the bottom quite dark still. And here is where I'm starting to refer a little bit to my reference. So in my reference, here is emphasized. Oh, sorry, I probably went a little quiet there again. And here is emphasized. And then we've emphasized here, a little bit here, and we're starting to get that face into shape. Alright. Problem with skin is it's so easy to play around with for hours on end, so I think I'm going to try and make sure I don't do that. And we're going to try and finish this skin tonight. I don't know if it'll all be on stream. Obviously it's getting a little bit later for my fellow Australians. Don't know if there's any non-Australians on this stream. Doesn't tell me that. Or at least I haven't found if it tells me that yet. Just mixed up some more of that brown. You can see our wet blending has dried quite nicely. That'll be good fun to refine. The back probably needs a little bit more blue in it. The hair will need to be base coated a second time, because not quite everything was hit the first time. But let's see if we can get this skin done. So, because I don't want to go too light with my highlights, I'm actually going back in and I'm adding black to some of those shadows. Don't really want it to go all the way down. There we go. So it's just a thin coat of straight black in some of these shadows, and then blending it back up to that brown. Oops, that's a little green. Don't mind the orange tone. I think here, unfortunately, a green tone probably isn't going to look quite right. we're blending back up. We're going to get thinner and thinner and lighter and lighter. This is much better now that we've got the actual camera back, isn't it? Oh, that's a bit light. Like I said, I just want to be really careful. I don't want to go too light. I still want to keep it that really dark skin tone. I'm going to add in some of that black here. Join it up with that black that I already had. And then blend it with the brown here. It's very easy when you're by yourself, I'm discovering, to talk quietly, which is actually a little odd for me. Like I said, I teach in my daily life. So normally, my voice would carry across half a room. Or a whole room, I suppose, realistically. But I am finding that I have to keep reminding myself that you guys probably can't hear me if I continue to be nice and quiet. Just pop in that line there. Okay, so this bit I'm not going to go pure black on, but I am going to mix a significant amount of black in with the brown. I'm going to just see. Yeah, I actually quite like how dark that goes. Just going to have to make sure we blend it alright. I should have... Oops, that is way too bright. I should have left it quite dark from the beginning, but because I was playing around with skin tones and I didn't know where I wanted to go with it, we've ended up a little lighter. Just a little too green for me. Get some more of that red. There we go. I like the green tone in certain places. I like that hint of, you know, the Gaia concept. But do find that if you're not really careful with it, it does just end up looking like they're sick. Alright, I'll actually go in darker under here. I'm going to emphasize this part. Getting better at keeping it on camera at least. That is a plus. Alright. The hardest part's going to be deciding my shadows here, but I think what I've got now is pretty good. We're just going to see if you can see that. Bring this down. It's hard because it's easier to blend from where the blend already is, but when we bring that down, because we're stopping at the bottom, we're depositing the majority of our paint there. which will give us a heavy line and not a particularly smooth blend. But we don't want to go back and forth with our brush. We don't want to tear and ruin our brush strokes by doing that. She's coming along. I think the skin is going to be one that I try and get as far as I want with it, but I come back to later. I think I definitely want to get the eyes started. So you'll notice my paint is quite thin here. So it's going to dry quite thin. And I'm keeping it deliberately dark on the sides because that is going to help sell that idea of that top-down light. Thought about using the golden flesh tone from scale 75, but I didn't really want to add the yellow tone that's in it, especially because we're already working with that red. So I'm using this light skin to mix, even if it means I might accidentally go a little too light sometimes. Add some of those shadows back in. This is almost a glaze with how thin it is now. Not quite, because I still want to get those blends. So I'm going to pop some pure black in the eyes. I apologise, working on eyes. I'm going to pull it right close up. So if my head gets in the camera, when I'm working my way through something like this, what I'll normally do is pull the light all the way over. To basically where the camera's sitting at the moment. Okay. I'm just going to let that dry for a second. I'm actually just going to pull up a reference over here. So I've just got some references for the skin colour. There is actually quite a golden tone in a lot of it. So I might add that golden tone. So we might break out this sunny skin, golden flesh, sorry. Thinking Vallejo here. And I might even pop a little bit of this orange in. So I'm just having a quick look. There we go, there's a nice reference. You always want to reference with the same light source as yours, which is why sometimes it's a little harder to find one. So, I mean, we seem to have the highlights pretty spot on. We just need to add some of that golden tone that I was missing. So I'm gonna, over here, create really light, almost a glaze with that orange and brown. And make it real thin. Of course, thin doesn't mean add a ton of water, because that's when you get paint that splits. Yeah. So if you've got a little too much, there we go, you just wipe it off on your palette. I'm just gonna glaze in this orange tone. Immediately I can see that by using that reference, I've brought a lot more life to the colour of that skin. I was doing it a little too dark before. Not dark, sorry. I was doing it a little too desaturated. I really needed that colour in there. So I'm gonna apply that to the rest of the body now. A little too heavy over here. Pull some of that off. Just a tad of water. Really just go and spread it out. Gotta be quick when you're working this thin though. I haven't added any of that drying retarder, mostly because I've just run out on my palette. This glaze also helps bring some of those sketches together, which is good. It does mean I'm going to have to put some of that dark back in. But that is a much more natural skin tone now. You had a little bit of an unnatural skin tone going on there. It's almost like when you're working with Caucasian skin, you need to make sure that you've got that good balance of blue and red in there. Because if you don't have that red in there, it does look a little dead. If you don't have that blue in there, it just kind of looks sunburnt and not as realistic as you would like. Just making sure to hit the eyelids. Alright, that looks a lot better. Not quite as dark as I would have liked, but a lot healthier colour. Alright, hit that neck as well. Okay, so that's a good reference to have. I'm also now going to start with those eyes. Partially because I want to get them done, and partially sometimes you just have to move between things. Because if you don't move between them, you start to get real fidgety, or at least I do. So I'm just mixing up a colour here. I'm going for a sort of blind look. So the colour I'm mixing up is actually a bit of a red pinky one. I'm doing this because if I go straight white, it's not going to give you that sort of eye effect. But if I build up from another colour, it's going to look a lot more white and white. Do apologise, I can't talk at all while I'm doing eyes. That does not work. Alright. So we're just going to go back in every now and then and add another layer of that colour, but building up to white each time. Give me a minute. Oh. So, just having a look at the reference, I want to make it a little darker here, but I still want to highlight these cheekbones. So I'm going to start making sure I mix in a little bit of that orange into my colours. That red just wasn't cutting it. I think it was a little too pink. I'm going to add a little bit more of this to my palette, just to slow down that drying and to increase that blending. It also acts as a medium, so it thins it out a little. Alright, so just want to come in under here, just add a little bit darker to there. Just going to be real careful how I do it, because if I don't do it correctly, it's going to just look like a mustache. I think the key is going to be going up to here a little bit. And bringing around the shadow / mid-tone from here. And then we're going to come back in, so you can see that's highlighted the cheekbones a lot more. Just gonna blend that back in again. When I'm blending here, I'm coming in with the colour, but then I'm taking everything off my brush. So I think you want to make sure that you emphasize where the lip is. So I'm going to go real dark around the corner here and underneath, and then you come in with that light highlight on the edge. Oh, sorry, probably getting quiet again. Okay. So I'm remixing a couple of my colours here too, just to make sure that I've got that orange in there now. Might have to put a glove on this hand. I keep leaning on her stomach. Not good in the long run. So I'm painting this one actually to enter the Beyond Miniatures painting contest. So both her and Dahak are going to be part of my contest entries. Just pop it back over this way a little. Alright. So I'm just going over it all with a darker glaze, because I've got some nice highlights in there, but I do want to still keep that really dark tone of the skin. I have to make sure I don't miss the eyelids. They're very easy to miss. I want to go all the way down both sides of the eyelid. There we go. And I'm just going to come in and make sure we've still got this mid-tone. In the face. And that we've still got that really dark area down here. I'm just blending them while they're still wet. So, I'm gonna do another pass on those eyes. I'm gonna break out a slightly smaller brush now. Go size 0. I have some Rosemary and Co brushes that I picked up. I quite like them, but whenever I do fine detail work, I just find myself going back to the Broken Toad again and again. They're just really, really reliable. You know what? Just had a thought. I might not start from a pink base. I might go that ethereal look. So I might actually start from a blue teal base. Yes. Like I said, I can't talk while I'm doing eyes. Just went a little too high that eyelid there. So I'm just gonna try that eye again in a second when it's dry. Always good to have a scrubby brush. How's that light? Alright. Let's try that again. That's a little bit more successful, isn't it? That pops a lot nicer too. Okay. So we're going to keep blending this skin in. Going to keep adding that orange tone back into the body. I really am just going to do it with light glazes. And this one, much like the first coat, is probably going to take a while to dry because I wanted it to be quite smooth, so I've added a fair bit of the drying retarder. So that I can keep going back and forth. And blending. And just in general, really refining the miniature. Getting that much more chocolatey tone coming through. So I'll probably go a little bit quiet here for a couple minutes, just because I have to work a little quickly. I'm still not entirely confident on this particular skin tone. Oops. Seem to have gotten a little bit of paint close to the ferrule there. Let's just fix that. So I am trying to get these little muscles here, but they are quite elusive even with a good brush. Just a little hard to find. So we're going to hit that collarbone and get that real mid-tone going here. So I'm just blending and refining, making sure I don't lose that color tone. Making sure that I keep this darker color tone here. Unfortunately, the blending and refining process really is just one of those ones where it's just a lot of back and forth, back and forth. I am going to have to figure out how to moderate that chat though. Spam bots aren't my particular favourite. So that's coming along pretty well. Still some areas on the back of the shoulder. I'm going to remember the ears too. I'm not going to do too much on the ears until after I've done the hair. It's just very easy to accidentally paint ears while painting hair. But I am going to do a layer just to remind myself. Alright. I'm going to go back to the eyes now. So I'm just mixing up a light teal, and we're just going to keep going up incrementally just to get that rounded effect. I might even, before I go too much further, do a dark wash in the eyes, just to get them nice and dark. And a bit. Stomach's gone a little bit funny there. Oh, sorry, I'm speaking quietly again. Habit. Just gonna glaze over here. I was just getting a little bit of an odd texture on there. So while I wait for that to dry, this is the other miniature that I have painted, Dahak. He's almost done. I think there's a little bit, I mean, it's one of those ones where there's a ton more I could do on his skin. And it was kind of just about going, at some point I need to stop. So I'm going to take some photos of him later and decide whether or not he's done. Alright, so I'm going to take the blue that we were using on the wings, actually. I'm going to really thin it down, and I'm just going to turn it into a wash that's going to get into the corner of these eyes. It's just going to really help add depth. It's going to take a while to dry. If you can see that, let's see if we can focus this baby up close. She's just got a dark ring around the outside of her eye. Alright, so skin's getting there, eyes are drying. Don't think I want to touch the wings again tonight. I think the wings are going to require some planning. So I might just take this opportunity to do another coat on the hair. In that blue-black that I made. I'm trying to stick, wings aside, I'm trying to stick to a mostly limited colour palette. The wings are kind of going to be where the colour is, so I don't want to overwhelm the rest of the miniature with tons of colour. Quite a bit darker on that. Alright. I always leave the hair till later on in the miniature because I always find that one of two things happens. One, you put your hands all over it, which means that everything fades off it anyway. Or two, you get paint all over it because hair is the last thing you care about when you're trying to blend skin well. It's also the easiest to fix. This is obviously going to be a little bit slower because I'm being a little bit more careful. Just done all that work on the skin. The last thing I want to do is ruin all that good work. Not that it's not fixable. It's all fixable. But I'd rather not have to. Just grabbed the head out of habit. Mucked up all the stuff I did on the top already. Well done. So I do think I'm going to need to grab some music. Not sure what type yet. Something chill. Maybe some lo-fi. Oops. Apologies. Something just on the background for when I'm doing these things that require a little bit more concentration. Not a lot of chat, there's not much you can talk about. It's blue hair, well, it's black hair with a blue tint. Which reminds me, I do have to fix the colour of the skin on the back. We've missed that. It's still quite that desaturated colour we started off with. fixed the tip of this brush earlier, but seems to have returned with a vengeance. So just got a tiny hair poking out. And that tiny hair really likes going where it shouldn't. Now, especially now that we've added the orange tone to the skin colour, it'll pop a lot nicer against the blue. Come on. Alright, just a little bit left. Just the inside here. So that hair will take a while to dry now. We wanted a lot of blendability, but the payoff is it takes forever to dry. That's okay. So I might get the eyes done and then we might call it. So I think the best way to hold it is going to be like that. Oh, no, still hit the hair a little. That's okay, no major damage. How's that for you guys? It's pretty good. Alright. Let's take this teal colour we've been building up. So that dark blue's dried into the recesses there quite nicely. It's a little bit too bright. Still want to build it up slowly. And the reason we're doing this build up is we want to create an effect of an eyeball without having to actually paint an iris. And the best way to do that is to make it round. And you make it round by doing a much darker outer ring and a much lighter center. And we want to give the impression that it's pointing upwards. So we're going to make it darker at the bottom of the iris. And we're going to build in the white near the top. That end, I might even put another glaze. Of this much darker colour near the bottom. They're a little uneven. I think this one needs to be blended down a little more. Just keep checking the back because it's really easy to lean on the hair. So they're not quite pure white, but anything beyond this you're not going to be able to see on camera. So what I might do is leave that there, call that a night for you guys, and I shall see you back soon. See you, lovelies.